Invited tonight by Councilmember Oakes, who will then lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
All right. I was telling Dean that normally I'll have something prepared, and I'm not prepared. But isn't it wonderful we live in a country where we will start off a meeting with prayer and have the ability to do that, and then the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you'll join me, I'll say a prayer, and then we'll stand. Our Father in heaven, we're indeed grateful for this day. We're grateful for the wonderful moisture which we have received this year, and the benefit that will give to our state and the residents here. We're thankful to be able to live in a nation which is still has the freedoms which we have in our Constitution. We pray that that may continue. We're grateful for the willingness we have of people to be able to serve, and both serve in legislative bodies, but also residents who want to be involved and get involved in things that concern them. We're thankful for our city and for our country, and we pray for our leaders that they might make wise decisions and that they might be guided by the principles which were from the founding fathers of this great nation. And we say these things humbly in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilmember Oakes. Our first item then is call to the public. We have one person signed up to speak. You'll have 3 minutes. Turn the time over to Ed Davis.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to come here. This is probably the first time you've seen only one resident from Westgate here. But I wanted to make it a point to come, particularly with the events of the last few days. And first of all, begin by thanking you for the work that you've done over the last few weeks and for both individual and collective times that we've met together, both staff and the mayor and council. Grateful for that. When I received the package and come and go of what they're proposing, I was elated at first. I glanced down the letter, and then I realized after a few minutes, and in fact I sent Josh, he and I have kind of created a relationship with Come and Go, sent him off a text, and in the intervening few minutes from the time he got the text and called me back, I read in greater detail his letter, and what I thought I read was not there. I thought I had read that they were moving all of the accesses out to the street, out to 200 North, and I was grateful to see that one was going. That was an improvement. But it unfortunately does not address the primary concern that we've had as neighbors, and that is the crossing over of both commercial traffic and our children's safe route to school. Because of the nature of the history, and you guys are all been bored to death with that. I'm not going to go into it. We are where we are. And I think, by the way, thank you for your opening prayer. I feel peace because of that. Side note, I'm going to use all my 3 minutes. I got to move. I moved here from Oregon. What we just experienced would not have happened. And so I'm grateful for it. I'm going to cut right to the chase. Through all this process, there's one remaining question in my mind. And so when Josh called me back, I asked him that question. Why is there such resistance to putting all the entrances on 200 North? And I said, would you be willing to go along with that? And his answer was no. That was disappointing to me. But because I can see no compelling reason. Now, I'm going to say this. The door remains open to have a meeting, and we intend to go to that. let their engineers explain to us why they're going the way they are. He made a comment to me that from my personal background and experience, I didn't agree with. And that was that the circulation on the site would not work unless with the two on 200 North. It's my words, not his. A lot of them.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, he gave me 3 minutes too.
Oh, did he? Okay. All right, council, do we have any declarations of conflict of interest to declare? Any conflicts to declare? No? Okay. All right, then I am thrilled to have the opportunity to turn the time over to President Brad Mortensen from Weber State University. I have the opportunity to serve on several boards with President Mortensen, and you're fantastic, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor and council members. Again, my name is Brad Mortensen. I'm the president of Weber State. One thing, an initiative that I have been charged with by our board of trustees is to get out and let folks know the great things that are happening at the university, to be louder and prouder about everything that's happening at Weber State. And one opportunity that we're taking is to visit our city councils, especially where we have students who are part of a leadership group that I'll talk about in just a minute, and introduce one of our outstanding students. And just to be able to have you meet one of our students and let me give a little bit of an update about what's happening at the university. One thing that, here in Kaysville, we have 29,914 students in total at Weber State, but 1,906 of those are from Kaysville. We have 674 who are enrolled degree-seeking students in one of our programs, either online or on the Ogden or Davis campus mostly. But we have over 1,200 students who are taking concurrent enrollment classes, probably mostly at Davis High or some at Farmington High, right? We're proud to be serving those students well with a very affordable way to get a jump start on their higher education. Any guesses as to how many Weber State alumni live in Kaysville?
Probably
No one.
Probably a lot. We know a famous one.
There are several in the room,
Right,
right?
yeah.
Yeah,
right.
Weber State. Great.
You all and 15,945 others.
Wow.
Really?
So, yes, we are proud to have a lot of alumni here. A lot of our university leadership resides in Kaysville. Our Vice President of Administrative Services, our General Counsel, Director of Public Safety, Associate Vice President of Facilities Management are all Kaysville residents. So we appreciate the partnership we have. And I know there's another university that has some operations within your city limits, and they're great.
No, they're the obnoxious ones that you would have thought they were all.
But we hope you'll consider Weber State as really your university and know that we want it to meet all of your needs. One thing that we do with our students is to do a lot of community outreach through our Center for Community Engaged Learning. One of our students was recently involved in a program with Head Start here in Kaysville. And about her experience, she said, our group had a great time setting up the obstacle course in the woods for the kids who were participating in the Head Start program. It seemed like the kids had a great time as well, which was good. It was very rewarding to be able to take part in the things that the Head Start program had set up, and hopefully we were able to help them out with why they were doing in our own very small way. At the overall university level, we're pursuing a lot of initiatives right now to promote the growth of the aerospace and defense workforce, as Mayor Tran knows well. We go to many meetings we're excited about the partnerships that we are developing. We're now have an educational partnership agreement with Hill Air Force Base. Our facility at the West Gate, the Mars Center, Miller Advanced Research and Solutions Center, the legislature just funded $20 million for us to put in some advanced equipment to do composite manufacturing for ballistics and hypersonic applications to meet the needs that are developing with the Sentinel system on base. That's just one area where we're trying to grow and expand and support the needs of our vibrant economy in the community. Now, if I can introduce to you our student, though, and this will really be the high point of the evening, much more than me. Austin Peterson is one of our presidential leadership fellows. The PLFs, as we affectionately call them, are nominated by faculty or staff, but not only for their outstanding academic achievements at the institution, but also because of their involvement in other ways across the university. And Austin has been with us as one of these fellows this year. The fellows not only do leadership projects that they organize themselves, but they also are ambassadors at many of our events and in the community, and really just tell their story, tell their personal story about how Weber State has an impact on them, and try to convey that larger impact we have across the community. So at this time I'll ask Austin to come up and share a few words.
Good evening, council members, Mayor Tran. Very happy to meet you all. I just want to introduce myself and then tell you, as President Morton said, my quick story about my experience of being a student at Weber State. So I grew up in Kaysville. I've attended Burton Elementary School, Kaysville Junior High, and Davis High. I actually attended Davis High with Mary Tran's son Ryan.
Oh, did you?
This was quite a few years ago, but we actually, I believe we did karate with each other and Ryan. With Sensei Burke.
Yeah, okay, that
a
was
long time ago. I
okay.
looked quite different. I was 12 back then. So it was good to see you again.
Nice to see you.
So, as you can see, I grew up here. I'm integrated here. I'm a person at Kaysville, and I'm very excited to share my legacy of Weber State with you alumni who have graduated from Weber State. So, moving on to my story of why I chose Weber State. Essentially, when I moved on to college, I went to UVU, and it was a fantastic school, a really great school, but it wasn't for me. I got extremely sick my very first semester of college, and nobody told me that I could drop my classes or anything like that. So I failed every single one of my classes my very first semester at UVU, and I started my college career with a 1.25 GPA. And I could not get it together after that. I had this mountain dropped on top of me, and I could not get the wheels rolling. No matter how hard I spun them, I was continuing to fail, semester after semester, to the point where UVU actually asked me to stop attending and to take a break and figure things out. So I took the opportunity. I spent 2 years just figuring myself out, worked on my mental health, figured out what was going on in my life that was preventing me from being successful. And at this point, I was ready to come back to school. I knew I wasn't going to go back to UVU. Nothing against them, it just wasn't for me. And the only other school that would accept me with a I think at that point, a 1.3 GPA was Weber State. And so I go there, and they have me meet with a counselor and start figuring stuff out. And I sit down with her, and I apologized. I said, I'm so sorry for this very, very low GPA. I was so embarrassed and really ashamed about it. And she cut me off, and she just said, stop. She said, you do not need to apologize for this. You can be successful. What is in the past is in the past. We can't change that, but we can change the future. And so you can be successful.
That's awesome.
And that's what I needed to hear. At that moment, somebody believed in me. And it allowed me to believe in myself. And so I walked into Weber State, my very first semester being back, and I tore it up. I started pulling out 4.0 after 4.0 after 4.0, and really succeeding because somebody else gave me the opportunity to be courageous, to believe in myself, to believe that I could be successful. And this last semester is my first semester of receiving a scholarship for academic performance. My first scholarship ever. And it was such a huge blessing in my life. Weber State has given me the opportunity to be successful. They gave me a second chance when nobody else would. No other college would even look at me. They wouldn't return any emails, nothing, because I was deemed undesirable because of my low academic performance. But Weber State knew that giving me an opportunity to be successful, that I could do it. And so it was just such an amazing, amazing opportunity for me. And, I thank you again for taking the time to listen to this story, because it is very, very important to support institutions that give people second chances, that give people the opportunity to be successful when they've been kicked in the teeth and knocked down, which is what happened to me, and at no fault of my own as well. And so it's just, please, as you move forward, recommend Weber State to people that you know. I grew up here. I know the reputation that Weber has is just Weber State, and that's okay. But what people don't realize, what the students here at Davis High, what they don't realize is that Weber State can provide phenomenal opportunities for them. That they don't have to go crazy far away to find these opportunities. They can stay at home. They can be here and attend a college 30 minutes away. That'll give them every opportunity that they can desire for and be successful in life. But that is my story, and I am so grateful to be here with you guys today. But thank you again for listening to me.
Thank you.
Wow, that was,
Yes, sorry. I apologize. President Morrison just asked me to tell you what I'm studying, my plans. So I am a history major at Weber
Awesome.
State. I'm also taking my prerequisites for my MBA on top of that.
wow.
So it's been a very busy life. I'm also a father of 2 children on top
Wow.
of that. So
That's awesome.
yeah, so I'm very, very busy. And it's been a very bumpy and wild road, but Weber State has helped me navigate that. And it's been fantastic.
Gosh, thank you for sharing your story. That is so inspirational. I'm so inspired by you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And it's fun to see you again.
Yeah, it was fun seeing you too.
Yeah, thank you for being here. Thank you.
So, thank you, Austin. We have lots of other students who have inspiring stories like
That's
that
cool.
that I feel very privileged to associate with. We want Weber State to be a university that no matter your income, your past academic experiences, your race, your ethnicity, you have the same access to our programs and the same chance for success in those. And that's what we're all about. And you don't have to take my word for it, though. There was a study that Georgetown University did that came out about a year ago on the return on investment of 4,500 colleges and universities across the country, public, private, large, small, all types. And the headline from that story was, 30% of colleges and universities don't really provide their graduates for much of a return on investment because they're so expensive or because they don't have good pathways that lead to the workforce. Weber State is the only school in Utah that ranks in the top 10%, whether you're 10 years out from earning your degree or 40 years out from earning your degree. So we really feel like that's a manifestation of us not only being affordable and not only having programs that align well with workforce needs, but kind of the personalized attention that Austin talked about to give our students and graduates confidence to go forth and succeed. And that's kind of what we're all about. So thank you for allowing us to share that message today. I'm happy to respond to any questions or now or in the future. If there's any ideas or opportunities you have where we can partner and help with what you're trying to do, please don't hesitate to reach out. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, President Mortensen. Does anyone have any questions?
Just one question
Yeah.
that came to mind, but maybe I'm putting you on the spot. How many students come from Weber State that are out of state? I'm just curious to know. My wife came on a golf scholarship,
Okay.
played for Weber State, but other than athletics, is it drawing in out of state folks or?
Yeah, no, thank you. That's a good question. And I was at Faculty Senate this afternoon, so you could ask me a lot of things. I don't feel put on the spot at all. But 92% of students at Weber State are from the state of Utah. 75% are from Weber and Davis County. And 40% of those are from Davis County. So we're very much focused on serving northern Utah and the state of Utah. We do feel like we're a bit underappreciated in the value that we can bring and the attractiveness that we can have for students from out of state, especially with the cost of tuition. For in-state, our out-of-state tuition is kind of competitive for what students might pay in other states, and we're fortunate to have great support from the legislature to make that possible. So we're trying to be more intentional about bringing in out-of-state students, and they help us build up that on-campus experience that a lot of students in Kaysville don't see as appealing at Weber State because they want to have that
Right.
college experience more. But we're committed to serving our local students first and have a really strong track record of that.
And that was going to be my follow-up question, was that I think, he said Jess Weber, that is so
Right.
classic, but, and also said, an appeal is that you could live at home. I don't want my kid at home. I want him gone.
Yeah.
So what do you, I guess, what are you trying to do to foster that, like,
So I wish
come
I-
and
if-
stay
if I-
here?
If I could come back in a couple months.
You can tell us something exciting.
But we are kind of in the early stages now of, we are really, if you compare us to any other university in the state, we are dramatically underbuilt for off-campus housing.
Yeah.
And there are some real opportunities, we feel like, to do some public-private partnerships and build that up. And a lot of that involves working with Ogden City, and we feel like we're doing some good groundwork there. Hopefully, we'll be able to have some big things in the near future.
Sweet.
That would be awesome.
That's one of the things that I'm working on, because that's
That's the
good
draw.
for all of our
Yeah.
students, for our local students as well as students to come out of state, because it's like, where am I going to live? What am I going to do?
Yeah, it's the Greek system or this or that, yeah.
So we're working on that. Thanks for
Awesome.
the questions.
Thank you so much.
That's good. Thank you so much. Appreciate
Yes. Thank you
being
for
here.
your service. It's a thankless job oftentimes, I know, but it makes such a difference for our communities. And again, it's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you. Okay. All right. I kind of did this a little bit out of order, so we already talked about conflicts of interest. We're on to number 5, consent items. Does someone want to make a motion on the consent items?
I'll make a motion that we approve consent items A through E.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and a second. Comments, council? Okay, seeing no comments, I'll call for a vote. Councilmember Blackham?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes. Consent items passed. I forgot to mention that Councilmember Jackson is out of town, so he is excused from this meeting. Okay, on to number 6, action items. Okay, an ordinance to amend Title 17, Chapter 30, Conditional Uses and all other sections of Title 17, Planning and Zoning, which pertain to the Planning Commission approval of conditional uses. I'll turn the time over to Melinda.
Mayor, Council, I did not put any slides together for you this evening. We had enough in our land use training. So this is a very simple, straightforward item, although it was complex to put together because conditional uses touch nearly every single chapter we have in Title 17. But the simple presentation of this is that we are requesting the land use authority be moved from the Planning Commission to the staff for those conditional uses. And this was heard by the Planning Commission on February 23rd. We did have one public comment that was received through an email prior to the meeting expressing opposition to the change, and we had 5 Planning Commission members there that evening. They voted unanimously 5-0 to give a recommendation of approval to the City Council. So we are recommending approval of the proposed text amendment, but I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you, Melinda. We don't have anyone signed up to speak, so council members.
Are you lit up?
Councilmember Hunt?
You can't
Or-
see if you're lit up.
You're not lit up, okay. I
So-
can't see who's lit up. Go
Yeah.
ahead, Councilmember Adams.
I
Okay.
think kind of like my biggest concern about this is typically I like things to be talked about, right? And sometimes it has to do with just airing grievances and think tank. I was talking to a couple of Planning Commission members about this because oftentimes these conditional use permits, it's like automatic approval, nobody shows up. A guy's, an electrician, and he wants to run the business out of his house, but basically he's not doing anything crazy. He's checked all the boxes, so it's a not a legislative deal, right? Like how we talked about during the meeting. But sometimes it's somebody's wanting to have a daycare and they still have checked all the boxes, but there's a few neighbors or some people who have concerns about what's going to be going on there, how many cars are going to be driving in, where they're going to be coming from. And it's those circumstances where it's nice to have, in my opinion, it's nice to have a body of people who can think differently. Like one person might think as a mom and another person might think as a business person, and they can all kind of express some of their reasons why they would want certain conditions to be placed on the use. And I guess my concern is if we just put that in staff's hands and those circumstances where people of the public do want to make recommendations or have their voices heard, how are we going to know that they are getting their voices heard, and how are we going to know that it's going to be looked at from a bunch of different angles?
Sure.
Does that make sense? And I don't know if there's a way to do that. Like, Perry and I had spoken about this. If there's a way to make it so that as soon as one person asks that it be thrown to a public style meeting, then that conditional use goes to Planning Commission, or if there's a way to have like just one Tuesday that's all for conditional uses and they just fly through them. I guess I'm curious why, if the Planning Commission didn't want to have these anymore on their plate, and if it's creating some type of a burden that we want to take away.
So
Lots of.
Yeah, great questions. One, the American Planning Association and the Utah chapter is recommending, as well as the Utah Office of the Property Rights Ombudsman, that these administrative approvals are handled at the staff level. And I think the primary reason for that is because as professionals who are trained in this line of work, we are more likely to get things right than lay people who come in and may not listen to staff, which is a situation we had last fall that resulted in an appeal. So we do have a lot of conditional use permits that come through. About half of our applications that we process through my department are conditional use permits. The council or the Planning Commission had a similar concern about being transparent with neighbors and having an opportunity for them to bring forward a concern or at least find out what's going on in their neighborhood. And we can accomplish that without doing it in a public meeting. Our practice right now, even though code doesn't require it, is that we've been putting a sign on the property where we have an application. We could still continue to do that and then just let people know that our process is we put a sign out, it has to be out there for a week before we'll approve a conditional use permit that they have. Now, one of the downsides of having this done in a public meeting or expressing interest in seeking opinions from the public is that we could very well be in a situation where they bring up something that our code does not address. And by law, we can only apply conditions in our code, apply conditions to a conditional use if they are addressed in our code. And so if they came forward and said, here's this circumstance or this scenario, we want you to apply this condition to address that, but I don't have that listed in my code, I can't do it anyway. And we're kind of right back into a situation where we had with our subdivision, over on the west side a few weeks ago. So that doesn't mean then that we couldn't change our code going forward for the next time an application comes through. The majority of the conditional use permits that we receive also are for our home occupation permits. And our code, our land use code is very light, but the most robust areas of our land use code are actually those home occupation permits. So I think there are a lot of regulations within those home occupation permit sections that allow us to apply code. There's also another remedy which we handle all the time, which is the code enforcement cases. And so if there is a situation where someone has a conditional use permit, they are not following that, then we have a method of trying to bring them into compliance. So there's also that, and I would hope that over time, as staff, we've done this enough, we understand the pitfalls enough, that we would be able to address what those conditions should be, and even including bringing forward a text amendment on something that we needed to have. So I hope that answers your questions,
No,
but
that's great.
I mean, Mindy and I are talking through this because those home occupations come through the business license, and we both kind of agree that erring on the side of caution and putting a sign out there on the property where that permit's coming through, that is probably the best course of action for us.
Thank you, Councilmember Blackham.
Man, this was a lot bigger deal to me than I guess must have been to, because I spent hours on this dang thing. I reading all of our ordinances, reading this. And you know, when I was a staffer, I will admit, it's so much easier to just do things when they come in and you just make a decision and move on, you know. But on the other hand, I've always kind of felt like conditional uses are there because there might be something that we just don't see. And so it's not so much a public hearing, but public comment sometimes. And I kind of agree with John. And I mean, I like the idea of actually putting it in the ordinance that says that you do have to have a sign out there. There has to be at least a week. And they have the opportunity to give public comment. No public hearing, just public comment, and then the decision can be made. But I actually wanted to see it in the ordinance. I didn't want it to be, oh, our policy is we might go do it. Our ordinance is you apply for a conditional use permit, it puts a sign out there, and it's there for 7 days, giving the people who are affected by this, because it's like we've all said, we don't hear from anybody out there. It's like because there's no huge items on the agenda tonight, there's nobody here hardly. But if there was something, the room's full because now it involves them. Well, conditional uses sometimes involve them. And I agree, there's a lot of them. And I thought maybe the correct way would have been to start out by saying, let's just take our conditional uses and narrow it down to 1 or 2 items in each zone and make those others permitted uses, because that's really what we're doing now, is we're saying these are permitted uses. They're not really conditional uses unless you put conditions on them, I guess, which you can do, but the conditions are usually pretty direct, aren't they? I mean, they have to be something, you can't just dream up these conditions, generally.
Right, they have to be conditions that are already listed in code, and it's a rare occasion when we have a condition that is applied to a specific use or application outside of what we have in our regulations.
Well, and this is kind of a dumb example, but you may come in for a preschool, which allows up to 12 students. Well, they come to you and they do that. I don't know if you would research enough, and maybe you would, I'm not saying, but maybe there's one right across the street. They do it at the same time. So now instead of 12 cars coming in to drop off, there's 24 cars coming in. And then if you don't make sure you overlap, you know, you start at different times, which it allows for that. That's a condition you say you have to have at least 10 minutes between or something, between ending one session and starting the other. I think it's written in there somewhere. But the one thing I really don't like is I don't like staff making exceptions and modifications, because there's that chapter 25 where we have exceptions and modifications where staff could literally change the side yard setbacks. I don't agree with that at all. It says that if you have a house, let's say we have 2 8-foot side yards required, but if for some reason the one house next door is 12 feet away instead of 8, you could literally say, okay, we're going to give you an exception to allow you to go up to 3 foot, I believe is what it says in 1725, I believe, the ordinance that is exceptions and modifications. Let's see.
It becomes just like as long as you're 16 feet total.
Yeah, as long as you're
That
16
wouldn't
feet
have
total, but
anything to
that,
do
you know,
with
but if I'm a
conditional
person
use.
that has 12 foot as a side yard, well, it says, I think it says right here, and this is why,
He's just talking about something different.
yeah, I'm just saying, on a lot held in the zoning ownership, lots of record, passage of zoning, where is it? It says you can go down to 3 foot, and I'm like,
Is this on a conditional use permit?
It's part of it, yeah. It's part of exceptions and modifications, because if you go to the planning commission portion, they have to go to the planning commission to get the exceptions and modifications.
that.
But that's changed now to say land use authority, I believe, towards
So-
the end of where you've,
So, okay, I'm looking at that 1725.5. You could leave that with the planning commission?
well, that's
You
what I'm
just
saying.
take
That's
that
kind of
out,
a,
and it has to be
that
8
to me is a
feet.
legislative, kind of a legislative deal. And and I think you've got it written,
Can't we just exempt any land use decisions?
well,
this-
except for.
These are
spec-
land use decisions.
Well,
and
but like a business license, the home-based business isn't, is it? For conditional use permit?
It is, it's in our land use code.
Oh, it is in the land use, okay.
Yeah, it's a, we're allowing that.
For that land
business
use, okay,
to
got
be
it.
used in a residential setting.
Okay.
So, Mike, Councilmember Blackham, excuse me, one of the difficulties of
I know.
bringing this forward is that there are these oddities that exist, like
There
this
are.
one. And if you're not comfortable with that as a council, we could remove that section and leave it with the planning
Well,
commission. We could also just
Well, I
run a
think
code
anything-
amendment to remove that section altogether and not have those exceptions allowed.
I just don't think that you should have that chapter 25 where it's exceptions and modifications, because now you're kind of coming up with, because if I'm thinking something that's administrative and it says it's an 8-foot side yard, I shouldn't be able to come in here and have you change that 8-foot side yard to something less. Is what I'm, and
So you could assign the land use authority for chapter 25 to be the planning commission
You
and not
could.
have that be for
That-
staff.
And I wished I could find it in here now. I read it earlier because I'm sitting here and you're all staring at me and I'm trying to find it.
Well, how about this, we'll go to
look at-
Councilmember Oaks for just a minute
Yeah.
while you look it up.
Or we could all look out the window while he found it. No, I think my comment's pretty much in line with Councilmember Adams and Councilmember Blackham. I think, Melinda, that there are probably 80 to 90% of the decisions that are made with conditional use that should be strictly administrative, and maybe 100%, but that we should be able to move to staff. But it's finding that, and maybe it is when one or two people comment, then that's like a trigger point that we send it to planning commission. And maybe that's not even the right thing. I'm just trying to find a way, how do we, in potentially controversial topics, that we have planning commission be that land use authority entity. And
Well,
I don't know how to properly delineate, but
Sure, I think the most likely scenario to have a controversial topic is when you have two neighbors that do not like each other.
yeah.
Candidly, we deal with code enforcement all the time, and a lot of that is just neighbors that hate each other.
Yeah.
So from that standpoint, I don't feel like having a mechanism that's like,
I agree.
okay, we have two people with questions or two people with comments, now we trigger that. I think we just put in the process as Councilmember Blackham has suggested, that we put a sign out. There's at least a 1-week waiting period. If we have any comments that come in, we can address those. I think that would be the best approach.
And that's what I'm trying to say is public comment, not public hearing. Just send you
Sure.
public comments, because sometimes I think there are things that brought up that you just don't think about, that you weren't
Well,
really thinking of.
Here's my question then for that, do you want those shared with the council, those public comments? Or no, you think staff should be able to just handle them, sort through them?
No, with planning commission.
No?
At planning commission, on council, we were,
Or, I'm sorry, planning commission, yeah.
I was saying, actually,
Oh, I'm sorry. This is a
Councilmember
discussion. I like
Adams.
this
No,
discussion.
no, I would, yeah, I mean, initially what I was saying was that sometime, yeah, I mean, I'm thinking like you have two neighbors that don't like each other, right? And maybe the person, who's to say who's right and who's wrong, there's no judge and jury, but maybe the person who's applying for the conditional use permit is is justifiably not liked by the other neighbor for one reason or another, right? And so, like, having a chance to hear the other person's side on why they say, gosh, this person should not have a nursery because they're like outside beating their dog every day or whatever, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, interesting. But you're saying from an administrative standpoint, it wouldn't matter if they were beating their dog, because as long as they checked all the boxes, we are liable to give them a permit.
That's exactly right. I was on.
Except for, and I'll just finish with this, is except for the fact that when you talk about conditions, that's where it gets interesting to me, because if it was just a permit, I would get that. Like, you apply for the permit, you get the permit because you checked all the boxes. But the word conditional is in here, which means that there's conditions that can be placed upon that person. And those conditions are decided by the person who's looking at it, right? Or
Well, the conditions have to be based on evidence and data. So it can't just be my opinion that I think traffic is going to be too congested in this area. We would have to say, look, this particular use requires a traffic impact study. Then we'd have to look at that study, and it would have to say, yes, it impacts it. Here's the recommended mitigating factors to put in. So, I mean, it is hard, because if it's not in our code, we cannot
Condition it.
apply a condition.
right.
How about something like this? What if we did, how about if the planning commission was the body that's, it's a conditional use permit, meaning that it can be revoked. So if it's appealed, or if someone complains about it, then it goes to planning commission to sort of be, no, we can't do that?
Well,
You
I mean,
could,
so
but
I'm saying staff would
I think you would
approve
want
it, and then it could, because the whole reason that it's conditional is that it could be revoked. If someone abuses it, they're not following the conditions.
The name conditional use permit is a misleading term, because a conditional use is a permitted use. Period.
Right, but it can be revoked.
But it also may be a use that is sensitive enough, you might want to consider applying additional conditions. Now, however, through case law, as time has gone on, cities are hamstringed from applying conditions unless they're already addressed in their code. And that's because, like we had last fall, we had upset neighbors. We had neighbors that said, you know, this code was never meant to do that. And then we had a planning commission that completely ignored staff and state code and experts on our planning commission and put in reckless conditions that got overturned. They put in 4 conditions. One was left in place, but you do have that. I mean, as staff, I was sitting here saying to my planning commission, you can't do that.
Yeah.
And they didn't want to listen. So it is hard, because it's called a conditional use and it's called a permit, but it's not. It's an allowed use, and we may or may not apply additional conditions. Now, going back to what one of the other council members was saying, the best practice is to put a new use into your code as a conditional use. And you have that in there for 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 years, and have figured out what the pitfalls are and what you do want to have as conditions for those. And then you put those conditions in your code, and you move those conditions to a permitted use. And you should have only a small section of conditional uses for your code. But again, most of these that come through are home occupation permits. Most concerns are about parking, it's about outdoor storage. Those are already addressed in our code. And so we can put parking conditions on, although there's, and I'll tell you as well that there's a couple council or planning commission members who feel very strongly that streets should also be used for public parking, because it is a public right-of-way. And so as long as they're not blocking a driveway, fire hydrant, then they should be allowed to park on street, which actually is true 6 months out of the year. But that said, we are limited to the conditions that we have listed in our code, and this again has evolved over the years with case law. And then secondly, I'm sorry, I just totally lost my train of thought because my mouth is getting dry from talking so
Well,
much.
hey, take a drink. I have one.
Just a second. Nick, you were going to say something.
Yeah, Ms. Greenwood's covered most of this, but conditional uses started a number of years ago. And when they started, Councilmember Adams' understanding of them is exactly right. They'd come in and the Planning Commission had broad authority, or the Land Use Authority had broad authority to impose a variety of conditions. Certain municipalities across the country abused that and they imposed unreasonable conditions. So the statutes and the case law has evolved so that we have to have those conditions, like Ms. Greenwood said, in our code. And I think where we're at with these, and certainly Councilmember Blackham has a good point that we might want to pull some of these out. But I think by and large, these conditional uses, we felt like they've been in our code long enough and we've kind of seen enough of these. These have been beta tested long enough that we feel like these are now ready to move into more permitted uses. And I think that requiring some kind of appeal to the Planning Commission if certain neighbors object is troubling, because we're very hamstrung on these. I mean, it's just very administrative decision that we have to make. So if they meet those elements in the code, even if they're beating their dog, they might not get a Doppel license to have if they have criminal history or whatever, but they get the license, they get the permit from the city.
I guess my point was, when I was on Planning Commission, we'd tell people, look, this is a conditional use permit, and the neighbors would say, oh, too many kids, too many whatever. And then we'd say, well, if, see how it plays out, and then if they violate the requirements, the conditional use, then you come back and you make it, you formally file a complaint, and then code enforcement will take over at that point, and their conditional permit could be revoked.
Yes.
Is that still?
Yeah, if you violate the terms of
And
your
that's what I'm
conditional
talking
use
about.
permit,
Okay.
then yes, you cannot use,
So right now, that's administrative,
yeah.
right? They come
Yeah,
in,
still an
okay.
administrative
So I
process.
guess I was presenting maybe a suggestion, could that be something that would be seen by a planning commission? But if it's better administratively handled, because that's code enforcement and that's where that lies, then I understand that.
Well, the use, I guess, is also subject to those conditions, whether it's a permitted use or a conditional use. If they don't meet the terms of the permit,
Right.
then
It's just-
they can no longer maintain that use.
And that would be an
Yeah.
administrative staff
Correct.
level code enforcement. Okay, thank you for that clarification. All right, Councilmember Blackham.
Okay, so I'm kind of get back to where I was, and I've seen this goal like up and down. Like there were years and years and years ago, there were a lot of conditions and restrictions on conditional use. The Planning Commission and the council didn't like that, so they reduced them. After they reduced them, then something happened in the neighborhood and they all went crying to the council, and then the council made them more restrictive again. So it's one of those things that just seems to have a circle this, circle that. And I guess what I'm getting at is people have to feel like they're heard. They don't like the fact that they feel like it's City Hall, they don't listen to me, they don't do nothing. I mean, one of the most amazing things that I ever did when I worked here is people would call up on the phone and they'd say something and I go, well, let me come down to your house and look at it. And they'd go, what? You'll come to my house? I says, yeah, I'll come to your house. Let me come down and look at it. And they felt like they had the opportunity to at least talk to somebody and talk about something. And that's why I say, the sign, all the sign does is, and if it's in the ordinance, says, yeah, we're going to put a sign out, then they're not going to say, you snuck this through, I didn't hear about it. They saw the sign, we gave them 7 days. They could make a comment to you. They might bring up something that is worth listening to. But it doesn't need to go to that public forum where people start to grandstand, and that gets beyond because they are pretty much permitted uses. But the one that I get nervous about is it says, this is how the ordinance has been changed to. It says, the width of one side yard may be reduced or eliminated when authorized by the community development director to a width of not less than 3 feet, provided the sum of the width of the 2 side yards is not less than the sum of the required minimum yards. So you would be using the adjacent neighbor's yard. That's kind of a legislative thing in my mind. I don't think that should be an administrative. And I sure wouldn't want to know that you came down and let my neighbor build up next to my house when I thought I had an 8-foot side yard and I didn't know anything about it, and you changed that. To me, that's a legislative item. Setbacks are usually taken care of when you do rezones and things like that. And then the only other thing, I thought there was a typo because it said something about farm animals, and it said I had to go to the planning commission to get a bigger number of farm animals instead of,
Farm animals comes to the planning commission.
so farm animals will go to the planning commission still. Okay.
Okay, Councilmember Adams.
Okay, so I think there's the two things that I feel like the benefits that happen from a conditional use permit coming to the planning commission is, number one, Councilmember Blackham said it, the people's voices are heard. I think we can achieve that through, setting it up so that the sign, whether it has a QR code on it or something that you can take a picture of and send your comment in, and that's viewed by more than one person. Like, I think, Val Starkey made a great comment to me the other day, is that, engineers always have two people look at things, and, told a great story about airplanes that I'm not going to repeat because I don't know that I could tell it as well, but that you have to have two people look at things. And I think that I don't know if that's how we're planning on doing it, that at least it goes through two sets of eyes, maybe yours and, I don't know who else would be somebody that would glance at it or look at it, but just for the sake of, then we achieve the idea that there's a little bit more of a think tank. And then the other element is that people need to understand. Like, you look at what we just listened to from Wilf, most people don't understand that. And so I think if there's a situation, for example, where someone's wanting to start or do their business out of their house, the most common complaint that's going to come out of the neighbors is going to be, wait, are they going to start storing all this stuff? And in those planning commission meetings, it's the time when Melinda then says, well, in our code, it states that you can only have this and this and this. And that satiates their their anxiety, right, about it. And so that was the one of two things. I feel like it provides a chance for people to be heard. It also provides a chance for you to educate them on what our codes will enforce these people to have to follow. And I don't know if we could achieve that with the sign. Like I said, some kind of QR code that, like, if they click on that, they get something that pulls up that says, look, this person's applying for this conditional use permit. Here's our codes that are going to be conditioned upon them. And like, for me, if I clicked that, read that, and I saw like, oh, they can only have 12 kids at a time. They can only have this and that, all the things that we're going to condition, be like, oh, okay.
So
now I know this isn't going to be crazy, right?
Yeah. So most of the time what happens is people see the sign, they call us, we explain that to them, and they never come to a meeting.
Right, and so that's why I'm wondering if.
So we're happy to
somehow figure out a way to avoid the whole calling, and like I don't know if that would be an easier way to have some type of thing that you can just be like, this are QR codes hard to make? I only use them.
And then it just populates with information for that property, you mean?
Exactly.
It's sort of like an agenda.
So it's an informative thing. It's, here's the information about the
property.
The conditional use. Here's our things that are going to be on it, and then place for comment. And then if people are heard, people understand, and our staff gets to at least see those things
That
before.
would probably cost money.
I don't know how much
I'm
money.
just kidding you.
Yeah, you got a budget item for that?
It's a really great
I
idea.
mean, Josh
I get it.
can do it.
Ryan's in the background
It's a
saying,
really
"Oh,
good
crap."
idea. Councilmember Hunt, go ahead. Oh, did you
I
have?
was just gonna say, over the last few years, we've had as few as 20, and we've had as many as like 35. So I think that's, if we did want to get very specific in the information that we were putting out, what we put out right now is an A-frame sign that just says, for more information, call. So we could probably build something more specific into that. I don't know if I want that in code, because depending on who I have in as staff, they may or may not have that skill set. But we can always answer a phone call and give people information, or they can come in. I think right now we do have staff that would be able to do a QR code or create something that would, take them to the section of code that it is pertaining to.
Can I ask you a question, John, then? I mean, I feel like we're still a small enough city, and you can answer this if you don't think so. I think we're still a small enough city that we can talk to people. And if it says call the city for information, is that good enough or not?
Yeah,
I don't
guess-
know. I
guess
mean,
that's good enough. I'm just trying to think of like there's still people who don't call. They see this thing, they think, and then they get outraged, upset, and they're like, geez, the city just approves it without even giving me a chance to.
that's what I'm trying to avoid.
Councilmember Hunt, go ahead.
Okay, so I've had a few thoughts, and remind me, before I get started, Melinda, was it administrative actions that can have an appeal? Or was it administrative can have one and legislative can
Well,
have another?
they can both have an appeal,
When,
but
Administrative actions
Referendum.
would go to our ALJ,
Okay,
appeal to our, and legislative actions are generally referred
referendum,
for
okay.
referendum.
Okay, so with that kind of in mind, I'll just kind of share some of the thoughts I've been having, and it could just be that I'm sentimental because I was on the planning commission and I enjoyed the conditional use permits. It was one of the few things where I was like, I feel like I'm doing something, like it's a thing. And a lot of it, I think, also goes back to educating, which is another kind of background that I have. So those all could just be coming back, and maybe it's the wrong thing, but I think a lot of the concern people have is that, and this I think is for the most part unwarranted, that the things that happen with staff have no oversight, and that they can be done in a back room or whatever. And while I don't necessarily agree that that ever happens, it always appears like it could be happening. Whether it happens or not, people will take it the way they want. And so I guess with that combined, knowing, we have only had the one appeal or I guess two on the one project in the last 4 years. Appeals don't happen very often. And I do think that having the planning commission deliberate is a good transparency piece. I guess a lot of the ideas I've had, I agree with Councilmember Oakes that a lot of these probably can be done just with staff. I don't feel like I have the expertise right now to know whether or not which ones I would prefer to have with staff. But if we do decide to go with giving some or all of them to staff, maybe it could be a good idea, kind of along with what the other council members have been saying, is if we don't have a public hearing, maybe allowing public comment at planning commission meetings, which I know is opening up kind of a can of worms, but allowing public comment. And additionally, if we move it to being a staff done item, perhaps just briefing the planning commission on what the staff has done with the conditional permits, like in the meeting, just saying like, hey, these are the conditional use permits that we handled this week. These are the conditions we imposed or not. And then the public still has an opportunity to see that other than just the sign. And you can share the feedback that's been given so people can know that they've been heard. And maybe just justify what you said. Like, I think people are concerned that things are happening and that even if they say something, maybe they'll be ignored. But if we just remove that ability, I guess if we add the ability for people to see the deliberation and the thought process that went through, it's not very different than the planning commission doing that deliberation in front of people, if that makes sense. And then with the way technology is, we could possibly even reach a broader audience. But I also think in addition to that, we could just always have the information like, if you want to appeal this, this is how you do it. I think that could be the education piece. Because then people, they don't feel like they haven't been heard and their hands are tied. They say, okay, I was heard. These are the justifications that they put in response to what they heard from me. And if I still don't like it, this is what I can do.
That sounds like a motion. Are you ready to make a motion?
Oh, that was just a lot of ideas. I don't know.
I can make a motion.
Okay, all right. Councilmember Adams.
And I make this motion because Councilmember Hunt was so convincing. I think having her as a previous planning commission is so awesome, because what she said that sort of swayed me was that it was an opportunity for them to discuss and, as a planning commission, make suggestions, and there has only been one. So I'm going to make a motion that we deny this ordinance amendment. action item A.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second? So your motion is to deny, meaning that conditional use permits will be reviewed by planning commission as
Yes,
policy? Okay.
that's correct.
Do we have a second?
Oh, it's dying.
Do we have a substitute motion?
Are we allowed to do that without a
Well,
second?
okay, we don't have a,
That
so it
motion
died?
would just
It
die
just dies,
without a
okay, do we have another motion then?
Don't write that down.
Good, good try, John. That was John's first dead motion. That was his first dead motion in 4 years. 4 years. Okay, good try.
I would make a motion that we table this item, and the reason I would do so is that we can more clearly define how public comment can be made and how there are certain items that are probably more legislative than administrative should be taken from that list.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have,
You jumped on his.
I agree with his.
yeah, we have a motion and a second to table. Discussion or comments?
No, yeah, I
Councilmember Oaks.
No, I agree with that, because I think we're all sort of saying the same thing, and it's finding that right balance. And if we're not ready to approve what's on the table, I think tabling it and having that conversation, and it might come back exactly the same, but after we've had a chance to really see.
So the motion is to table and give, well, I shouldn't make, but I'm saying, and give staff some opportunity to go through and give us a little bit of a delineation between the two. Okay. Do you want to add that to your motion?
I think I did already with my original
Did you
motion.
previously?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Is that, Nick, you got that?
I think I feel comfortable with the direction that we should
Okay.
staff, if Ms. Greenwood does.
Okay. All right, we have a motion and a second. Councilmember Adams.
Aye.
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 Okay, motion to table passes. Okay.
And also, thank you so much, Nick, Melinda, all your work. We appreciate it.
Yeah, you guys do like a huge heavy lift. You guys, it's like your ants, like you can lift way more than you should be able to, but
Right.
you're awesome and cooler than ants.
All right, let's move on to our work item, potential boundary adjustment with Farmington City along 950 North Street. Turn the time over to Josh Belknap.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I don't have a pointer, so I'm just going to use my finger.
Happy birthday to you. It's his birthday today.
Negative.
Oh,
That is negative.
Josh.
Yesterday.
Yesterday? Oh,
Oh, it's
happy
all
birthday
Pat.
yesterday.
Happy birthday, dear
Hey,
yesterday.
Did not realize that.
It's in the rearview mirror.
Oh, man.
Thank you,
Happy
though.
birthday.
Sorry. Thank you for having me here, Mayor and Council. As was mentioned in the staff report, we're currently working on a project with Farmington City. Oh, did I do it?
And you just broke it.
I killed it.
Here's another one.
Works is the rubber one. I can do.
Maybe that one will work.
I won't throw mine.
Does that,
Hey,
Oh,
hey,
you know
Josh.
what?
It's a
Josh,
bright
you wanna
green
use
one.
the
I
mouse?
won't throw it either.
Here, this one works though, if
Oh.
you want that.
I just want to point out what a big deal it is.
It is to get a pointer from
Councilmember Blackham just shared his laser pointer with me.
He's very
If you've been
protective
in
of that.
previous development meetings, you would understand what a big deal it is. Sorry. Rewind. Mayor and Council, as you're aware, we're currently working on a project with Farmington City to build a series of roads that start here, 950 North, running through Farmington, coming into Kaysville for a portion, and then continuing up Sunset Drive, tying into Shepherd Lane, Sunset Drive, and building a portion of an extension to the west. Excuse me. As we've been working on this project with Farmington and also working internally on this, as you can see, the red line here is the current city boundary. As we've been talking with UDOT, UDOT facility here and here, Farmington, and talking with Power Department, Parks Department, and one of the discussions we had with Farmington is, you know, how are we going to define the responsibilities for things like maintenance? That could be pavement maintenance, any damage along this corridor, as well as snow plowing. Coming down here to the interchange, we will have a responsibility. You can see these little kind of islands in between the highway and the on-off ramps, and then on the sides as well, that the city will have responsibility for maintaining, you know, mowing, picking up garbage, coming here to the park and ride lot, snow plowing that, garbage as well, and any mowing of landscaping that would be there. As we've talked with Farmington, another question that has come up is the address. You know, 950 North here, with a small piece of property here. This is not 950 North in Kaysville. This is, I think, past like 2300 South in Kaysville. So some reasons that we discussed with Farmington, a potential boundary adjustment that would just continue this line straight across, so that a couple of things happen. Responsibility for maintenance would lie with Farmington for the interchange, all the mowing, the garbage, same with the park and ride, and then the maintenance of the street as well. And we felt like it made sense for various reasons. Farmington has taken this to their city council, and they agreed that, yeah, it certainly is going to increase their responsibility and their cost for maintaining these things, but it does seem to make sense to make an adjustment like this. So that's what we brought before you, just for informational purposes at this point. We haven't gone through any sort of formal process, but just wanted to make you aware of the discussions that are going on, and as we move forward with the project. That would be our recommendation, is to make that adjustment.
Josh, will you tell the council what that property could be, or what it is right now? That corner
Yeah,
right
so
there?
this was the location of the meat farm, the Lauder property. It's now owned by UDOT. It's, I believe, zoned as agricultural, and you know, there's many things that could be done with that property. The rezone could put some housing in there, could put some commercial space in there. So I think what UDOT would do is, UDOT's not going to do anything with the property. They're going to finish the West Davis corridor, and then they're going to sell this piece of property and leave any rezoning or designing, designing up to whoever purchases that property. So,
And how much property is it approximately, do you know?
I think it's about 6 acres.
Yeah, I was gonna say, that's
Okay.
a lot of real estate to just like throw away.
Well, and can you explain why the city
Yeah, so
doesn't
I think,
find value in
yeah,
that?
there's certainly a value to this. You know, a developer could come in here and do something with that property, and that property could certainly generate some sales tax revenue, as we've talked with Dean about, you know, what would the projections look like. You're talking, you know, maybe 20,000 or so a year for a gas station, something along those lines. But for us, the big thing is, we've talked with the Parks Department and talked with the Power Department, is alleviating those responsibilities for day-to-day maintenance, not just from the cost perspective of what we're doing with those budget dollars, but also from a staff perspective, freeing up time and being allowed to work on other items, was what we viewed as, hey, this might make sense from a budgetary standpoint, as well as operations and maintenance.
And can you tell us what is west of that, by the WDC sign?
Yeah,
So
so
that
right here
property.
we've got I believe it's the Sportsman's Access with the state for hunters and other recreationists to access out to the Great Salt Lake shore area.
So not buildable, right there?
Correct.
Okay, okay. All right, so the 20,000 potentially in commercial sales tax income isn't worth the maintenance costs
Yeah, I think on an annual basis, you would see more than $20,000. And then as you're looking at the lifespan of this, obviously, year one, you're not going to be redoing the pavement. And right off the bat, you're not going to be plowing snow and things like that. But as that adds up over time, I think it would certainly eclipse what's coming in from that.
For me, is this work items
yeah,
or to
yeah.
just talk, or should we? For me, though, maybe the concern is not so much the cost of, where'd it go? Now there's a panda
That's
bear.
pandas.
Is it cute?
It's okay.
There you go.
Not, sorry. Yeah, panda's cute, although I hear they're kind of vicious and super lazy. Anyway, would not so much be the cost gain / benefit that we would get from what goes in there, say it's a gas station, but the fact that, we visited with all of those neighbors, remember when, when we discussed, and hopefully we're still planning on, I don't know, deeding that little bit of land over them, so we're not having to manage that piece of their backyards that we have torn out.
Here, so what would happen, this is just a straight line crudely drawn, but the city would maintain ownership from basically the back of the curb along the entirety, so the sidewalk and any park strip, and then there's also kind of a triangular piece here that we've got. And that'll be kind of a similar process to UDOT, is we're going to finish our project and then we're going to evaluate.
Yeah.
And, are there remnant parcels or pieces of parcels that make sense for the city to hold on to, and are there any that make sense to kind of divest ourselves of?
But that's a different
kind of
question.
No, yeah, so my concern really isn't so much with, I was going to finish, is that by giving up that piece, that 6-acre piece to Farmington, we no longer have control what that gets rezoned to. And so, if Farmington comes in, someone makes an appeal to put in apartments right there, our citizens are the ones really that are, from the standpoint of across the street, if you will, being affected by that. They come to us and, sorry, we gave that to Farmington, now they get to choose what goes in there. And so it feels like in some ways we're giving up our chance to plan that area or plan what's going to go there. Maybe that's okay. For me right now, I'm thinking I hate to give up the chance for us to be able to know what goes in there and plan what goes in there, because, I'm guessing we would want homes to go in there. Maybe we want a gas station, maybe we want something planned, but at least we have a say in it. We give it up. Are they buying it from us, or are we just giving it to them?
No, so we don't own it. It's owned.
Oh, yeah, right. That's right. So I guess my point, it is not the buying, so it really just comes down to whether or not we want to dictate what goes there, or if we want to roll the dice and let Farmington dictate what goes there.
Yeah, correct, yeah, I think you've got similar feelings with a lot of these residents, as we have spent a lot of time in public meetings with residents in this neighborhood. We've had a lot of input from Farmington residents as well in this Fox Hunter area that I think would have similar desires of, hey, we want responsible development here, and want to be involved in that process, as a rezone would likely take place there.
Any other comments?
The only comment I have is that, it looks to me like it's going to cost us a lot more to keep it, other than we do give up that, but I don't see that being very much different, whether it's in Farmington or Kaysville, what goes there.
Oh, yeah?
I don't.
They're just, you look at what they're doing with station, those guys, they're willing to build these gigantic, they just got a different mentality.
But I just look at the cost, I don't see, I've asked Dean a few times what it looks like. We know building residential doesn't really pay you any money. It just kind of taxes your services and you have to provide more and more. If it's commercial, you do get some money. If it'd be office building, you don't get very much at all. If it's retail, talking with Dean, the amount that it sounded like you were given isn't even close to what it would cost us to provide services for that area. So
I'm curious, why does Farmington want it?
I don't think Farmington is necessarily desiring it.
But why are they willing to
As
take
we
it?
talked about it with their staff, and one thing UDOT has been talking with us about is, hey, we really think that this could be a problem, having this boundary run right through the interchange and the responsibilities. That's what started the discussion. And as we've talked from a practical standpoint with their staff, I think they've agreed with that, hey, you know, that this probably does make sense in a lot of ways. Kaysville has a lot of additional road that they're building, and we have, I think, 2 times more road that we're building in this project than what's being built in 950 here. And I think it's probably good to know that there probably is benefit to Farmington in that they're very protective of, and rightfully so, of kind of this entrance to their city. They pushed for the installation of this interchange. It wasn't originally planned
Right.
Years and years ago in the planning process, and so I think they would appreciate, you know, hey, input. And I don't think that, as we've talked with their assistant city manager and city engineer, that and we would hate to see just anything go there. And I think they've had similar concerns of, man, this is the bottom of Kaysville on the other side of the road. I sure hope it doesn't turn into this, you know.
That's why they're willing to take it, is then they have control of what goes
Yeah,
there.
yeah, you know, the concerns that we heard were, man, if this was a apartment complex and we had no input there, so I think the concerns are probably similar in that regard.
But we could put density all along the south side of this property. Thumb our nose at them.
We could.
I'm just
You know,
kidding.
if we didn't love our neighbors so much, yeah, we definitely.
It's a good thing they're Farmington, right?
And another thing to point out is there are some limitations. These roadways that we're building, the purpose of them collecting vehicles and helping them to get onto and off of West Davis Corridor. Oh, I guess I was put the laser.
This is the mayor.
I don't need my eyeballs, Josh, it's fine.
And then getting onto and off of I-15, as you can see, the plan for on and off ramps to be installed with Shepherd Lane is limited access on these roads. You'll never see, you know, multiple homes fronting, you know, a lot
Right.
of drive approaches on these roads. We're trying to limit the number of entrances so that you don't have as many turn movements.
Well, and them having half of that interchange already, it just makes sense to me to have them take care of the whole thing, because then you don't have the back and forth of,
Yeah, when we
Am I responsible
introduced
for that, or you?
it in Farmington, we're like, man, you're probably gonna laugh at us. And the fact that they were willing to talk about this and kind of see from our perspective what seemed to make sense. Yeah, we felt like it was kind of a win-win.
okay.
Mayor, could I just address
Yes.
briefly? This is kind of a lengthy process. So just procedurally, what would happen if you wanted to do this is at a future meeting, probably the next meeting, we would bring a resolution that would indicate that you have the intent to adjust this boundary, and then you'd have to wait at least 60 days, have a public hearing, and then adopt an ordinance. So we'll certainly defer to the council on how you want to proceed, but it might make sense if there is any interest to start the ball rolling, because it's certainly
It's not quick.
yeah, it's not a quick process, and it's an entirely legislative process
Okay.
that you can change your mind on at any point.
Okay, thank you for that. Council, how are you feeling about it? I think it's a good idea to do it. It makes sense to me, but
I think it's a hard pill to swallow. I mean, yeah, it's a good idea. But, you know, I would prefer if we had the means to just annex that whole chunk and continue our Kaysville manifest destiny.
While we're annexing Fruit Heights.
yes,
It's hard-
right, well,
It's hard for
yeah,
my ego to say, here, Farmington,
you know,
have
that
it,
might be a
but
good idea.
if it's
Okay,
better,
okay,
I'm okay with it.
okay. Mike, John, council members,
I
You too?
haven't, well, I certainly have not, I am not ready to make up my mind
Well,
on
you
what we
don't-
would
we don't
do,
have
but
to
I
make our
think
mind
what,
up.
yeah, I think what Nick's saying is the idea of putting it out there to the public to hear. I mean, first blush is I hate giving away the power of what goes there. But I mean, I get it. I would hope that they wouldn't be like plowing and then get to the red line and just stop and get off. Like they would at least finish their run on the plow or whatever.
No, that would be Fruit Heights.
Anyway, but I think that like I would be comfortable doing what Nick said because I think that it will get vetted and hopefully we'll be able to figure out like, you know, if there's any kinks in this.
Yeah.
Certainly, yeah, and that's why I'm appreciative of this opportunity is to, you know, not be here and like, all right, we need an answer right now.
Right.
As we said, purely informational, just to let you know what's been being discussed and that we will have further discussions coming. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you and also receive input and feedback and continue that process with you, so thank you.
Thank you, Josh. It sounds like
Awesome.
we're
So how would a
good
motion
discussing it.
look for this?
Well, since it's a work item, no motion, right?
Yeah, I think just,
We just,
just
or do we need a
I'll prepare
motion?
resolution. No, I'll prepare a
Okay.
resolution
Okay.
and put it on the next agenda.
Okay.
And then if you don't want to do it between now and then, great. You can just
Okay.
deny the resolution,
Okay.
adoption of the resolution. And
So
if
we
at
have
any
some
point
time.
along the line you don't want to do it, we can certainly,
So next time, it's a resolution as an action item?
No, as
Or no?
proposal, right?
yeah, it'll be a resolution on the action agenda is what I
Okay.
anticipate. And all the resolution is that we have the intent
Okay,
to adjust this boundary line. And then we have to wait at least 60 days.
and then a
and
public
have a
hearing?
public hearing.
Public
Okay.
hearing.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then an ordinance that would officially
Okay,
adjust the boundary line.
okay.
And if you can give me a good cost analysis of why we would keep it, I would obviously want to look at that. But
Right.
so far, the cost analysis has kind of put it in the red and not the black.
certainly, yeah,
Okay.
we can provide a lot of information in that regard. And as always, as council has questions on this, please don't hesitate to reach out and ask. So, yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
What if Farmington puts a come and go right
Does it count as one of our four?
Thank you. All right, council member reports. Does anyone have anything they'd like to share? Councilmember Hunt.
I got to go on a tour of Hill Air Force Base today, so that was pretty cool. It was kind of cool to see, I mean, we're a little ways away from them, but cool to see kind of what our community is in relation to them and you know, maybe ways we can help them. So it was a good learning experience.
Thanks for doing that. That's great. Anyone else? No? Okay. City manager, do you have anything to report? Okay. All right. Motion to adjourn? Someone want to make that motion?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
We
Thanks.
should let it die so we can.
Yeah, thanks.
One meeting.
Nice, Abby.
Well, that would have been worthwhile to do just.
We should have just for fun, right?
You know what I mean?
Oh, I did too, John. I did too.
I think there's